Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for attending. Really appreciate everybody registering, getting logged in with us, coming live with us. So, hope that this is going to be uh, some really good information that we get over to you today.
All right. So, the cybersecurity world is riddled with myths. There are a lot of misconceptions that can leave your businesses vulnerable to attack. And so we want to kind of go through with you today, separate fact from fiction, and take a look at cybersecurity and what's true and what's false.
Exactly. Yeah. So, we'll just go ahead and we'll start right off with our very first myth here. And the number one, or not number one myth, but rather myth number one, is that phishing scams are obvious and easy to spot. Now, we actually did a deep dive on this last quarter. So if you didn't get a chance to see that, definitely go ahead and take a look. We've got it posted up on YouTube. There's a lot of good information in there. Previously it just used to be, hey, is this email misspelled? Don't click the link. But no, they're far more sophisticated now, and maintaining that vigilance and ensuring that you're not falling prey to the many different types of scams out there. This is a newer thing that is becoming more and more important as the cybersecurity landscape shifts. So, but again, did a deep dive on this, so definitely take a look back at that if you weren't able to attend live, which I know several of you were. All right, on to myth number two. My
My
organization is too small to be a target.
Yes. So, oddly enough, the size of the organization, if it's smaller, can actually make it more appealing and not less. So, they being the cyber criminals, they view smaller businesses oftentimes as easier prey because they know that they don't have a lot of systems in place that enterprise sized organizations do. And so when we look at the data and the numbers on it, businesses with fewer than 100 employees receive 3 times as many breach attempts because they assume that small businesses don't have these security measures in place. So it's not that you're a small target. Oftentimes they view you as potentially an easy target.
Mhm.
And so when we look at the landscape in the SMB market, I know for years I've heard, oh, we're small. People don't know who we are. Well, 20 years ago, that's true. They're not going to be able to find somebody, they don't Google Colorado Springs businesses and specifically target individuals. But today, the initial outreach attempts for breaches are all done automatically through AI or some sort of an automated tool. And so they will ransom a home user. If they could put something on your cell phone, they'd do it, whether you're an individual or in a company. So there's no such thing as too small for them to go after you. And you do have a digital footprint somewhere that they can find you. And yeah, it's the reputation of the small business for not having a solid security posture is definitely out there, and they will take the time once they find you. If they gain access to your network, they'll take the time to try to do as much damage as possible.
It's incredibly true. And that also is going to go ahead and lead us right into myth number three here. And this is the idea that we are only worried about external cyber threats. And this is a really common one. We get so focused on the idea of protecting against, threat actors or hackers that a lot of times we can miss the danger that is caused by insider threats. And that insider threat, I think we sometimes think of like, oh, that only exists in, corporate espionage and things like that. But it's true, it can actually affect anybody, right? And it's a growing menace that it can really very stealthily take things down from the inside out. And this can be performed intentionally, right? From things like disgruntled employees who, maybe they're on their way out, but they still have all of their access. Or it may even be unintentional. You could have a very loyal and diligent employee who accidentally leaks sensitive data. And these insider threats can actually be more dangerous than the external ones. And again, the big problem here is stealth. It's because they tend to go unnoticed before everything suddenly snowballs and you have a major crisis on your hands that creates financial loss, reputation damage, and a breach of trust with the people that you're supposed to be there to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been at Colorado High Tech for almost 15 years now. And so we've got a couple of examples of this that we've actually seen, play out in front of us here in Colorado Springs. A few years back, we had a practice manager who was let go, and we were not notified, beforehand that any of this was happening. And so she went in and she deleted all of her emails. And there was a lot of important information in there that the practice still needed to function. And so luckily we were able to retrieve that data. And so it didn't have any sort of crippling effect, but we've seen emails and documents be deleted by someone who's on the way out the door who is disgruntled. We had another client where they had data downloaded onto a USB drive and then basically stolen from a team member who then left. And so, making sure that our data is secure, what permissions do we have, what can we download, what is able to go onto a USB drive, things like that. It's not something that most people set up, and it's something that can come back to bite you. So that was definitely a bad one. And then last, we had a client who let go of a team member, but they didn't get back their office key. And so that team member came in over the weekend and deleted hundreds of gigabytes of data. And so, we were able to restore that. And luckily, we had measures in place where we could protect the client, but there was definitely malicious intent there. And actually, I fibbed because I do have one more.
Oh,
We had a medical assistant who downloaded patient images onto an external device. And this was actually for legitimate, non-malicious work, but they took those patient images home in order to do some work, remotely on those. But that external device was not encrypted. It was against the policies and procedures of the clinic itself, and it represented a HIPAA violation because we weren't secure in the transmission of data. So, if that were to get lost or if it were to get stolen or somehow, they were to get breached and that device is set up, then we've got a lot of sensitive data that's on there. So we've always got to be vigilant to make sure that, our employees don't become a vulnerability. So, with the correct policies, with regular training, making sure we're sticking to very strict access controls of the data, that's how we have to try to safeguard against intentional or unintentional threats from our team.
absolutely. And that'll take us right into myth number 4 here. And the myth here is antivirus software, or really any single tool, is enough. And the thing is, this used to be true. But from 2016 on, ransomware really came in and changed the game. And relying on any single layer of protection, right? It's like saying, okay, well, I just need one lock on the entirety of my building, right? We won't worry about the windows. We won't worry about the back door. As long as the front door has this lock, we're probably fine. And sure, antivirus still has its place. It's useful and it can stop some threats. But what happens when we start getting these sophisticated, newer attacks that it can't stop or that circumvent antivirus entirely? And that's why every business has to have a multi-layered approach to cybersecurity, right? It's very much like the Swiss cheese model, right? Because even if one layer exists and that has a hole, or in this case, a vulnerability, the other layers are still there to cover it. And that's the same method that we take to prevent potential breaches. So we have a lot of different things that are currently implemented, right? We have things like firewalls. Zach just mentioned encryption, multi-factor authentication. This is a big one. But then one of the biggest things that we're utilizing is regular proactive reviews and updates of the security measures and the practices that are currently in place. Because if you're just set it and forget it, those holes start to get bigger and bigger, and before you know it, they'll overlap, and then you have a hole that goes straight through to where all the important and relevant data is. And that's why we also recommend and implement things like password managers, early detection and response tools, right? These will enable constant monitoring of the environment that look for signs of suspicious activity and alert earlier when antivirus they hasn't even noticed that anything is wrong yet. And that's why we have to have these consistent monitoring of the critical systems. And above all this, like we just mentioned, that employee training is so important because all of these different factors play key and critical roles in defending the entirety of your network and all the digital assets that you have stored on it.
Yeah. And when we look at, those of you who have been with us for 2 decades or longer, in 2005, if we just had antivirus on a PC, we were probably in pretty solid shape.
Mhm.
And if we got a virus, well, they were mostly just annoying. You'd get the pop-ups and they'd come up in droves. You couldn't get them to go away. And so your PC wasn't functional, but you weren't at risk of bringing down the entire company for, having somebody access your financials and steal all your money, having somebody steal all of your patient data, or whatever proprietary information you may have on site. And so as we have, as we've moved on, obviously, from 2005, the threats that have come out are vastly different and they're so much more complex and sophisticated. And so many of you have done a great job of, kind of changing with the times. But for some of you out there, the old adage that, oh, I've got AV and I'm good to go. It just doesn't hold true anymore. And that's not what we're seeing out there.
And this perfectly leads into our next myth, which is this idea that cybersecurity is solely the responsibility of your IT service, provider or technician.
Yeah, and this is something that is very important to realize because I've met with people before and it's like, "Oh, well, don't you handle that for us?" And it's like, "Yeah, we handle a lot, but we can't do everything for you." This has to really be a partnership between you guys and us to make sure that we are keeping everything as secure as possible. And so we really have to have a lockdown from the top down mentality, from the CEO, down to the newest team member or intern that you guys may have. Everybody plays a role in keeping the business safe from cyber threats. And so, if we have an entry level team member that gets breached, it's likely that they don't have permissions to get into a lot of what the cyber criminals are looking for. But once the cyber criminals have a foothold in your network, they're going to try to move and try to steal other credentials, try to see what else they can access or who else they can breach through that first individual. And as they move across, they try to go what we call laterally and then vertically. So they're trying to move up the permission structure until ultimately they get to somebody who has the authority to, either extricate data or to log into financial systems or to ultimately ransom, the entire network. And so, we need to make sure that everybody on the team understands the severity of the role that they play in keeping your network and your data and your clients safe. Because it's not just us. We can't do it alone. This truly is a partnership between us and between you.
100%. And I can confirm, for our organization here in our network, that Zach is our most dangerous user.
Um, while that statement is true, if we could keep that on the down low a little bit more, since this is going on YouTube and somebody now is going to personally try to reach out and attack me. But yes, I'm a non-technical person, right? I understand it very well, but I can't log into any equipment. I can't fix anything. I open tickets when my stuff breaks the same way that you guys do. But yeah, for years, when we first started doing phishing campaigns, it was very likely that if somebody was going to fail, it was going to be me. So I'm in way better shape today. I feel like that's a lot of old Zach that Corey's bringing up and is not an accurate reflection of my talents in spotting scams now.
That's fair. I will recognize the personal and the cyber growth that you have experienced over
No,
time.
no, thank you.
You're welcome. Um, so we'll go ahead and we'll continue on here into myth number 6, and that is, hey, we're in the cloud, so we're safe, right? And I think this is a really common mentality. because the cloud is newer. It's a powerful tool, right? It gives us flexibility, scalability, gives us a lot of convenience. But just like any tool, you have to use it with caution. Just because your data is in the cloud, it does not mean that it's safe from attacks, right? The cloud, it introduces, in fact, a new set of security challenges that really have to be identified and addressed. Data breaches, misconfigurations, unauthorized access, these are some of the biggest risks of cloud computing. And I think it's super easy to assume that your cloud provider, they're handling everything, right? It's like, hey, my data's with Microsoft. Surely they've got it taken care of. But the fact is, you are still responsible for securing your own data. And they have that listed in those terms and conditions that we all just check the box on and move forward. I think there's also this general assumption that if your data is in the cloud, it's automatically backed up. But that's not necessarily true. There are different specific things to provide cloud backups. And we also are seeing identity threat monitoring more and more necessary as new measures that have become just increasingly critical in the ability to protect both your data and your users that exist within the cloud, right? We have a lot of clients that have begun shifting to serverless environments entirely. And most clients, if they aren't full serverless, they're at least hybrid. And so that user that sometimes lives on the server, well, it also sometimes lives in the cloud. And so we have to be able to protect that user account and the permissions that it's associated with, along with the data that we may have stored there. And it's because of this increased use in cloud user migration that Microsoft is now seeing over 600 million identity attacks every single day. And that is why this false sense of security that, hey, the cloud is a safe space is just completely untrue. So any sort of implementation that we have of security protocols and programs and monitoring across local and on-prem data, it has to also apply to the cloud. And that's, I think, a newer realization for a lot of folks. But it's so important, especially as we rely more and more on cloud storage and cloud management. So kind of switching from the new school of utilizing cloud computing, this is, I think, an older myth that has hung around for a good bit, and that is the idea that changing passwords frequently is enough, right? That's really the only protection that I need. And while changing your password on a regular cadence is important, it only works if you do it the right way. So, for example, longer, more complex passphrases, which are my preferred passwords, I'll tell you, here's a little trick for you. Use lyrics from songs that you like, right? Include spaces. If you can get an apostrophe in there, fantastic. It's a great way to create a passphrase that's memorable to you, but increasingly difficult to crack. And if you're using something like that, it only needs to be rotated annually. But now, if you have shared passwords, right? Passwords that multiple folks need to utilize to get to a single resource, those need to be rotated more frequently, especially in the case of turnover, right? Who was the last person that used that? Are they still with us? Let's make sure that those passwords are rotated more frequently. And that's where trying to keep track of different cadences can be tricky, but things like password managers, right? Those are very helpful in this situation. But something super vital is an offboarding checklist, right? And in fact, our whole next webinar in December is going to entirely be covering offboarding. So definitely make sure that you join us next quarter because there's going to be a lot of good information in that. Because even if we have things like MFA, which adds another layer of protection, right? You still have to make sure that MFA is documented and potentially rotated. And that's why actually we've begun implementing MFA on network administrative credentials through a tool called Duo. So this is a newer thing that we're starting to add on top of complex passwords that are rotated annually. But the thing is, at the end of the day, a password is still only a single point of failure in protecting the PC or the whatever it is designed to allow you access to. And that's why Microsoft, they've been continually creating new security measures that specifically address the management and protection issues that have arisen rather. And the thing is that they've locked these different password features and really other security features, many other security features behind various tiers of licenses. So now selecting the right license for your specific security and organizational need, it genuinely has almost become an art. I have a spreadsheet that I think has, I don't know, something like 67 columns and 180 rows or something like that, that helps us to select the right ones. And so that strong cybersecurity framework, again, it all really comes back to this multi-layered defense that needs to be in place. And changing a password occasionally is just one part of it. So that's where we're starting to see that this idea is just too simple to exist in the complex cybersecurity world that we all currently live. And that idea, I think, leads perfectly into myth number 8 here. And Zach, I'll let you take this one.
All right. So myth number 8, cybersecurity is a one-time investment. So, we've implemented a cybersecurity measure. The work is done, right? No, if it were that easy, we would love it. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So with the digital landscape being like a moving target, we need to make sure that we're being vigilant and we're adapting to changes and to things that arise. And so, when we implement a new cybersecurity tool, it's not set it and forget it. The team here, when updated features come out or something, like that, there's a change to the product, we have to spend time to go back in, understand how it interacts in your network, in your environment, and we've got a new checkbox, we've got a new drop down menu, or something else that we can utilize. And so we have to keep up on it from that end. But really, it's more of a process now than a product. And so when we're looking at reviews of security policies, what we're doing, right? We've got to make sure that we're educating. That's an ongoing piece. That's a big part of why we started this webinar series, because we want you guys to, be in the know about things, what's going on now, where do we think it's going to go, pieces like that. And we've got to make sure that this makes it out to your teams. So we also go through the process for many of you through a security framework from the Center for Internet Security, and we do what we call cyber hygiene. And so it's similar to any other type of hygiene, right? So let's take a for instance oral hygiene. We don't brush our teeth once and say, "Hooray, we did it." Our teeth are protected from cavities, and I won't have bad breath anymore. Well, that's not best practices for taking care of your oral health. And so you need to brush your teeth in the morning. You need to brush your teeth at night. You need to floss. You need to go see the dentist every 6 months. That is best practices for oral hygiene. And so in that same vein, we need to do a process in place where we are doing an audit, we're doing alignment, and we're doing remediation. Because if we're not doing the cyber hygiene piece of it, then we're going to have risk that we don't know is there because no one's looking at it, no one's checking on it. It's not something that we can automate with a tool. It's not something that may be affecting your workflows or may be readily apparent. So we have a process in place to do the cyber hygiene because unfortunately, cybersecurity can't just be a one-time investment if we're actually going to be successful.
Absolutely. And there is a running theme, I think, that we're seeing here, which is that it's just not as simple as it sounds. It seems like, okay, these simple solutions, these simple answers would be enough, but that's just not the reality that we're currently living in. And that is never more present than in myth number 9, which is this idea that compliance is security. And we work with several different compliance frameworks across many clients. CPI compliance, for example, right? That's your payments, making sure that those are secured properly. But HIPAA is a big thing that we deal with a lot of clients. And the thing is, these standards, they're designed to set a baseline for security, but they almost always do not go far enough. And on top of that, they may tell you what you need to do, but they're not going to tell you how to do it, and certainly not how to do it effectively. So this idea of simply, performing these actions or taking these, safeguards to just tick a box, it does not mean that your business, that your data is secure. To really fully protect your business, you have to have a full set of security practices that address your specific risks and vulnerabilities. And this means that you have to go beyond the compliance to build that proactive security framework, but also that mindset, right? This isn't just about the pieces that we can help you with or that we control. It's about looking at, okay, what are our own in-house processes and procedures? What are we following just to tick a box? And while that ticks the box, does it actually mean that it's secure? Does it actually mean that, hey, this is, yes, adhering to the letter of the law, but are we recognizing the spirit of that and saying, okay, what are we trying to protect here? What are we trying to accomplish? And do we need to go a bit farther than just what's been mandated of us? And that's really our goal here is not just us, but you all as in your organizations really working to ensure that you don't just look good on paper, but ensuring that your security measures are actually effective at keeping you safe when you're walking out into the real world, into the cyber world that we all move and exist through at this current time. So that's a really big piece, and it's something that we come across a lot. Is that, oh well, I tick this box. Yeah, it unfortunately means very little. And that's going to lead us right into our 10th and final myth here, and that's this idea that hey, we don't need outside help with cybersecurity. And I'll tell you, I think this is a myth that even we at one point subscribed to.
Yeah, yeah, I would completely agree with that. And I have heard, from various people that I've spoken with over the years that, oh, no, we've got X, Y, and Z set up. So we're good on technology, we're good on security. And, just like we referenced, if you've been with us for 20 years and we just had antivirus and a firewall,
Mhm.
given the threats that we faced back in '05, that was likely going to do a pretty solid job. But just like that myth, just the antivirus or single tool has outgrown its effectiveness. Outside help with cybersecurity is an absolute must. And this is not just for you guys, but this is also for us. We have a very skilled team of IT technicians who have a lot of expertise and a lot of longevity in the business. But we used a what I would call a home brewed cybersecurity solution for many years, and it held up and did pretty well. But the threats today that we face are too complicated. They're too complex. We don't have the resources in house to be able to dedicate to a full security team because that's what it would take for us to do a good job. And so that's why we partnered with Center for Internet Security, or CIS. They are a nonprofit organization that created a guide and controls and basically a roadmap for us to be successful in your network and across all of your technology. And so, it's a multi-stage approach to partnering with, an external expert. We spent thousands of hours, literally thousands of hours, putting together the audit, defining and clarifying everything, making sure we understand exactly how it would work in your environment. But it's very complicated. But we spent all that time and we invested all of that because of how necessary it is if we actually want to be successful in stopping cyber attacks. And so, yeah, similarly, if you're in a point now and you've heard something or you've got some questions, you want some assistance, in just learning more about something or implementing a solution that we've talked about today, we're always here to help. So we work to develop, individually tailored solutions to meet the uniqueness of your organization and the threats that, may affect you more than it may affect others. So yeah, it's we don't want to be too scary and and create too much consternation amongst everybody. But these threats are real. We see attempted attacks, every day on various platforms. And so we just want to make sure that you guys are getting everything that you can out of your cybersecurity. You understand where you guys are at, what risks you may have, and what the potential remediation would be to those risks.
Absolutely. So that is we're right at the end of our time here. We're right at the end of our webinar. So thank you everyone that attended and registered and came out. Really appreciate that. It does look like we're running right at time, so won't have any times for questions, but certainly look forward to seeing everybody next time.